Hello, welcome to Indus News Live with me, Usman Lone. Well, we begin this hour with our top story, and that's Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan condemning India's plan to implement an Israeli approach in occupied Kashmir. The Indian Consul General in the US, Sandeep Chakravorty, said New Delhi will build settlements so Hindus can return to the valley. Talking about the Israeli model, the Indian envoy said if the Israeli people can do it, so can the Indians. Chakravorty said Hindu settlers will be able to occupy all of the land in Kashmir, just like Israel gradually occupied Palestine. In a tweet response, Imran Khan said this shows the fascist Hindutva ideology of the Indian government. Khan said world powers are silent over Indians' human rights violations in the valley because of trade interests with India. Now, the Indian Supreme Court has reserved its verdict on pleas challenging restrictions imposed in occupied Kashmir. Lawyers for the petitioners argued that an entire valley of 8 million people cannot be locked down legally. They said the curbs are unconstitutional and that such restrictions have to pass the test of proportionality. A 3-member bench reserved the verdict. India imposed a curfew and communications blackout after illegally annexing occupied Kashmir on the 5th of August. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says the Iranian nation has defeated a foreign conspiracy behind recent protests. He was addressing a volunteer Basij force in Tehran, which helped put down the demonstrations. The Supreme Leader said recent unrest was a dangerous plot in which big money had been invested. Meanwhile, Iranian's Interior Minister says over 700 banks and 140 government sites had been torched in the disturbances. Abdulreza Rahmani Fazli said around 200,000 people took part in nationwide protests after sudden petrol price hikes. In Iraq, at least 8 people have been killed in separate incidents in Baghdad and Karbala. 6 people were killed and 15 wounded when 3 separate explosions hit Baghdad. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. 2 protesters were killed during clashes in the capital in violent anti-government protests. Dozens have also been wounded in the southern cities of Basra and Samawa. Medics say 30 people were wounded when security forces fired tear gas in the city of Hilla. So far, 340 people have died in the anti-government protests which broke out in October. Israel has carried out more airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. Israeli army spokesman Avichai Adrei said fighter jets struck Hamas buildings in the city of Khan Yunis, but no casualties have yet been reported. The Israeli army said it struck a series of military targets in response to rockets fired from Palestine. The army said a weapons manufacturing site and an underground infrastructure were targeted. 36 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in violation of a ceasefire agreed on November the 14th. In Hong Kong, the 11-day standoff at the Polytechnic University between the police and protesters has ended. Authorities say no pro-democracy protesters were found inside the university premises. This was the last of 5 campuses protesters occupied to block transport links between Hong Kong Island and Kowloon on the mainland. The protesters blocked the entrance of Hong Kong's Cross Harbour Tunnel, which was reopened today to traffic. Pro-democracy activists say they're planning fresh demonstrations on the weekend after a landslide victory in local elections last weekend. Authorities hope the post-election climate will remain relatively calm after 6 months of unrest. The US Congress has invited President Donald Trump to its first impeachment hearing on the 4th of December. House Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler says Trump could either attend or stop complaining about the process. Democrats are investigating allegations of a quid pro quo by Trump with Ukrainian President Zelensky for a personal political favor. Multiple government witnesses have testified at this month's impeachment hearings. The House Judiciary Committee will soon take over the impeachment probe from the Intelligence Committee. Democrats are aiming for a final House vote by Christmas, which would set the stage for a likely Senate trial in January. Well, the US envoy to Afghanistan, John Bass, has condemned the arrest of 2 activists by Afghanistan's army. The pair allege a massive paedophile ring is operating in the schools of Logar. On the 13th November, Musa Mahmoudi and Ehsan Ullah Hamidin told The Guardian over 500 children were sexually abused in 6 schools in Logar. In a series of tweets, Bass said the detention of the activists isn't acceptable because it's an act of intimidation. Earlier, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani said he disagrees with the intelligence agency's approach. He instructed the National Directorate of Security to hand the activists over to the Ministry of Interior Affairs. US President Donald Trump says he will designate Mexican drug cartels as terrorists for their role in trafficking people and narcotics. This prompted a swift request for talks by Mexico. In an interview, Trump said the designation procedure is not easy, but they're well into it. Soon afterwards, Mexico's Foreign Ministry said it will seek a high-level meeting with the US State Department. Mexico has long been besieged by violence from drug cartels and criminal gangs fighting for control of territory. Now to South America, where Bolivia has appointed its first ambassador to the United States in 11 years. The Foreign Ministry says Walter Serrat Coelha will fill the position in Washington. Coelha will require the Senate's approval, which is controlled by Evo Morales' Movement for Socialism. The interim president, Janine Áñez, has taken steps to change Bolivia's foreign policy during her short tenure. Áñez cut ties with socialist Cuba and Nicolas Maduro's Venezuela. But meanwhile, La Paz wants the arrest of former minister Juan Ramón Quintana, along with other key members of Morales' government. Quintana and several other officials have taken refuge in the Mexican embassy in La Paz. The EU Parliament has elected Ursula von der Leyen as the new president of the European Commission. The German Conservative won approval by 461 votes to 157. Leyen will take charge as president of the European bloc on the 1st of December. Leyen's comfortable majority win ensured her plan to transform the EU into a green superpower. Addressing the European Parliament, she said fighting climate change is an existential challenge. The new Commission President vowed to provide funding to help EU economies adapt to lower fossil fuel consumption. In Albania, a 6.4 magnitude quake shook the capital Tirana, killing at least 26 people and injuring 650 others. The earthquake is the strongest to hit the country in decades. The Albanian Defense Ministry says a person died after jumping out of a building during the earthquake. The bodies of 3 other victims were pulled from the wreckage of 2 collapsed buildings in Durrës. A ministry spokeswoman said 2 women were found in the rubble of an apartment building in the northern village of Thumain. Firefighters and the army are helping people trapped under the rubble. In England, the bodies of 16 migrants found dead in a lorry in the UK last month have been returned to Vietnam. Police found 39 bodies inside a refrigerated lorry container in Essex on the 23rd of October. The bodies were flown to Hanoi's Noi Bai airport and taken to the rural town of Dien Chau for funeral proceedings. Investigations are underway in the UK and Vietnam, where several people have been arrested or charged. Families of the deceased said it was a relief to receive the bodies of their loved ones after a month-long wait. Officials say the bodies of the remaining victims will be sent home soon. Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world right after this short break. Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now, President Arif Alvi says Pakistan has played a pivotal role for peace in Africa and looks forward to enhancing relations with African countries. The conference focused on Pakistan's foreign policy regarding African countries. He was speaking at the Envoys Conference, and Alvi said Pakistan and Africa share many problems which they should address together. Alvi said the 2 sides need to fight poverty and ignorance collectively. Earlier, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi also addressed the conference. Mr. Qureshi said the promotion of tourism and enhancing trade ties are Pakistan's top priorities. In Bangladesh, an anti-terrorism court sentences 7 men to death for the attacks on the Holy Artisan Cafe in 2016. 22 people, including 17 foreigners, were killed in the attack on the popular night spot in Dhaka. The court acquitted one of the accused, Mizanur Rahman, for the lack of evidence against him. Last year, police charged 8 members of the banned militant group Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh for carrying out the attack. The 2016 assault was the bloodiest terrorist event in Bangladesh's history. Now, Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said his country is talking to Pyongyang and may resume relations with North Korea. In an interview, Mahathir said Malaysia is well placed to interact with both Koreas because of its human resources and stable politics. He said Kuala Lumpur wants friendly relations with all the world's countries, even North Korea. Mahathir said North Korean officials plan to visit Malaysia. He added both countries will decide an appropriate time for Malaysia to open an embassy there. He also repeated his support for South Korea's regional peace initiative. Well, staying with South Korea, income disparity there has turned a huge number of students against President Moon Jae-in. Young people are calling for the president to shift his policy focus from North Korea to them, as many are finding it difficult to cope with living costs. More in this report.
The old Korean concept of dirt spoons, those born to low-income families, and gold spoons, people from better-off families, has recently exploded onto the political scene. 26-year-old university student Kim Jae-hoon is among those who have borne the brunt of the country's deepening inequality.
I can't complain that we have different starting lines. It is fine that I start from a different level, but I am upset with someone getting perks.
Young, low-income voters like Kim have deserted President Moon in record numbers. The president concedes he had fallen short on his promises to improve employment and social justice.
I'm aware of it and fully understand that people are disappointed as the government has not been able to solve problems related to various unfair issues. More and extra effort will be needed on that.
The change in direction sees many young students now protesting against Moon.
The current government began its term with a slogan saying, "Opportunity will be equal, process will be fair, and results will be righteous." These are just speculative. They rather showed the opposite things. That's why many young people feel betrayed.
Gold spoons have replaced gold rings as the most popular gift item, traditionally given at the first birthdays of newborn children, wishing them a wealthy life. Analysts say the trend reflects the bitter hopelessness of the growing army of young dirt spoons.
In Southern California, thousands of residents have fled their homes as wildfire engulfed parts of Santa Barbara. County officials declared a local emergency as the fire spread through the Los Padres National Forest. Spokesman Mike Eliasson said over 63,000 people have been evacuated and nearly 2,500 buildings are in danger. He said no injuries have been reported just yet, but one building has been damaged. Authorities are still not clear how the blaze started. Now, in business news, profits at Chinese industrial firms shrunk in October at their fastest rate ever year. It's been seen as another symptom of China's economic slowdown. Data released by the National Bureau of Statistics shows industrial sector profits fell last month by nearly 10% year on year. This compares to a decline of over 5% in September. Overall, the profits of Chinese industrial companies have dropped by almost 3% this year. China's economy has slowed down because of the trade war with the United States. Now to the stock markets, and in Europe they're trading higher after US President Donald Trump made his positive remarks about the trade talks with China. Earlier, most Asian stock markets closed marginally higher. London's FTSE 100 and the DAX index in Frankfurt are leading gains in Europe, both rising about 0.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris is also fractionally higher. Earlier, Tokyo's Nikkei 225 index and the Kospi in Seoul gained fractionally. Investors are treading carefully in case the trade negotiations between Washington and Beijing collapse at the last hurdle again. Trump highlighted those concerns by once more linking the trade talks to China's role in Hong Kong.
We're in the final throes of a very important deal. I guess you could say one of the most important deals in trade ever. It's going very well, but at the same time, we want to see it go well in Hong Kong, and I think it will. I think that President Xi can make that happen, and I know him, and I know he'd like to make it happen.
Well, it's 21 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all from me and the team here in Lahore, but for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.